Hello, everybody, and welcome to another interview for my blog and podcast, A Rich Comic Life. My name is Richard Gill, and my blog describes my experiences of watching well over 1,000 comedians for nearly 50 years. I'm delighted to welcome my guest today. It's Mr. Simon Randall. Yay! Hello, my friend. How are you?
I'm good. I'm fine.
Nice to see you. Thank you so much for doing this.
No problem.
We're going to talk about your career for the next 45 minutes or an hour or so. And I'd like to start off by going way back and asking you, how did you become a compere in the first place, please?
Well, I mean, I don't really see myself as a compere. I'm a sort of compere for expediency reasons sometimes, I mean, I'm primarily very much promoter.
Yeah.
I guess if you want to go right back to the beginning, it started when the entertainment officer at my college got sent a copy of Hand in Glove by the Smiths and a
How
note
cool is that?
banned for 200 quid. I decided not to. I was on the committee, and I was really annoyed by this decision. And I was sort of justified, I think, because when they would have been playing at our college, they were like number 10 in the charts of This Charming Man. And I
Wow.
thought, I've got to be more hands-on in this. And so I actually stood for election to be the entertainment person the following year. And it was mainly bands and stuff, but we did a little bit of what they call cabaret in those days as well. We got a guy, I don't know if you saw him in your long watching career, Kevin McAleer. Do you know the guy?
Yes, very much so, yeah.
Kevin McAleer, who's a bit of a sort of legend and fantastic act. And Phil Cornwell was on as well, who my stepfather knew him, so I got him on. And a guy called Ian Saville, the socialist magician. I don't know if you remember that. We've never seen him. But I mean, it's just normal magic tricks, except he sort of, he had red handkerchiefs and blue handkerchiefs and that kind of thing, instead of like a Marxist revolution when they all came out red. Ian McPherson hosted the show, and it was a great evening and surprisingly busy as well. And then when I finished doing that, I came back to London, and I mean, you couldn't really, as an independent promoter, putting on bands is always going to be difficult. There's, all the equipment, there's all this, that, and the other to worry about. There's sound checks. There's, it's impossible really as an individual. But putting on comedy is a bit easy. You just need, a mic stand, and if you're lucky, a sort of dodgy old spotlight to shine on them. There was a room above a pub that I knew about near where I lived, and I thought, let's give it a go. And it was kind of right time, right place. Early 90s was just when it was really hitting its stride. And there weren't that many suburban clubs. This was in Hanwell in Ealing. And
I've got a very
it
good
went
friend.
pretty well right from the go, really. Some amazing acts played there in those days, in retrospect. First show we had, first show we did, Sean Locke was the headline act. 30 quid paid him.
Wow.
And the opening act the following week was a guy who was then called Harry Hall, although of course he's Harry Hill now.
Yeah.
Right in his early days, I've been to see him do an open spot at the Comedy Store.
Wow.
The week before, and I put him in, and and they were all great. Those people, right from the word go. Stuart Lee played it in the early days. Bill Bailey,
Brilliant.
as a double act called the Rubber Bishops.
Yeah. I saw the Rubber Bishops years ago.
Yeah,
when he was starting out.
They were good. I mean, I think it's the inevitable end of all double acts that the talented writer one ends up on their own. It's just the economics of it, apart from
it's a fascinating story because I first came down to London 30 years ago. My home city's Carlisle. And so it was the beginning of the 90s. It was about 1988 when I first came down.
That's around when we started.
And I discovered the Comedy Store. And on the first bill at the Comedy Store was John Maloney, Richard Morton, Joe Jupiter's, Linda Smith, God bless her.
Yeah.
And top of the bill was an act called Charles Fleischer, who went on to voice Roger Rabbit. So
he's American, isn't he? Yeah. I never actually saw him. I think
he was superb. He was a very visual comic, but yeah. But
he was amazing, though. I mean, that night when I went to see Harry Hill, for instance, Frank Sinatra was on that night. He was just another of the acts that were.
It is just extraordinary. One of the great things about my blog is I list all the acts and all the venues that I've seen them in. Yeah. So it's like a jigsaw of them developing their act, and it's wonderful to see them develop, watch them develop, and keep going. And Harry Hill is a classic case in point because he still holds the record for the best opening line I've ever heard. I saw him downstairs at the King's Head in about 1990, about 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And he walked on. It was late. He brushed past me, jumped up onto the stage, and he went, "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm really sorry. I had to have a testicle brought down. That's why I'm late." And everybody laughed.
Yeah.
And he said, "From Derby." And when I met him 25 or so years later, I told him this. He went, "Oh, Rich," he said, I still tell that line now.
Oh, really?
Just amazing. And what's brilliant about him is that he's done all the arenas and everything and the TV, but he's come back into the clubs because clearly he loves what he's doing.
Yeah, he does. And he always did. And he always used to practice his sets a lot because he's got a very complicated set when you think about it. There's lots of references back. There's jokes that build up over half an hour, you know, and the punchline comes later. They're told in sort of 5 or 6 parts in between a load of other stuff. And I mean, that's
about 5 jokes going at once.
Absolutely, it's very complicated. And I think he practices it. And I always got the impression when he like came to our place, that what he was doing, he was getting used to saying the words and sort of putting all the emphasis and the action in later, just because he needed the words. But yeah, he's very behind nearly every good, successful comic is a lot of hard work, basically. You know.
Oh, without a doubt, without a doubt. Every comedian I talk to on here, I said to them, I can imagine it's all about experience. The more experience you get, even although you do a bad gig, you have to do a bad gig to become a better comedian.
Yeah, and you've got to make sure you learn from it rather than react against it, and think about why it went badly and how can I do it differently next time. And you get comics who are very good, but really, you know, all they want to do is turn up on a Friday, Saturday night, bang out their set, and that's fair enough, you know, if that's what they want to do, and it's fine. But no one who does that is ever really gonna get big, and it's all the people who, you know, like I say, Russell Howard, for instance, good example of someone who just works and works and works at it. You know, he puts so much effort in, and he's always trying different stuff and writing it down, see what the reaction was. And it, you know, it's like everything in life, it's a bit of a slog. Do you know what I mean?
Exactly, my friend. I first saw Russell Howard before he was famous at the Edinburgh Fringe. Yeah. And I knew he was a talented comedian because I had trouble with a brand new phone that I couldn't get to work, and it set off at the start. And he just ripped me apart. He was absolutely hilarious with an audience.
Yeah. And
I thought, never take a mobile into a comedy gig.
No. I mean, most people are very good at it now. Most people have their phones. There was a period when I thought mobile phones are basically going to ruin live comedy, but there's still the odd annoying person who films the show.
Yeah, very, very much so.
But apart from that, no, not too much.
No.
But yeah, it's hard. It's a slog to become a really good comic. You know?
Yeah. Let's move on quickly to Headliners Comedy Club, because the club has been going for over 21 years. Is that correct?
Yeah.
It's one of my all-time favorite comedy clubs.
I
regularly go along, and it's how did it all come about? Headline.
Interesting, actually. Well, we had that same first club that I was talking about at the time was at the Viaduct pub in Hanwell, which is a Fuller's pub. So they kind of, I guess I was on, you know, my phone number or my address was sort of available to them or whatever. By the time Headliners started, I'd moved into Ealing Film Studios, and we
Right.
were in one of the studios. We had a gig there, which was a great gig actually, and it was, obviously brilliant setting to be in the studios. And I got a letter. It was in the old days. You didn't get an email. It's in the late 90s probably. I got a letter from the property guy at Fuller's, and he said there was a place they had available in Reading that they thought would make a good comedy club. Did I want to go along? Would I be interested? So on and so forth. And I went along, and it was this upstairs place. And unfortunately, frustratingly, it had a load of pillars in the way, which is
Right.
off so often when you go and look at a potential venue. You have these bloody pillars and you think, oh, they're going to be a nightmare. So I said to the guy, like, unfortunately, it's not really quite suitable, and it's outside the area where I've been operating and where I have an audience. If you've got anything in West London, I'd be really interested. And ironically, that venue, by the way, became Reading Jongleurs ultimately.
Wow. Yeah, yeah.
And so on and so forth. But so they said, oh, there's this old warehouse at the back of a pub in Chiswick. You can go and have a look. I mean, it's a complete wreck. I doubt you'll be interested, but if you don't mind, potentially wasting an afternoon, then go along. So I went there, and it was, I mean, it didn't look anything like it looks now, but I thought, oh, this place is fantastic. It was just an old sort of warehouse with bricks everywhere. There were slates missing from the roof. They'd use it as a cricket school. It was there from Victorian times, pre-war. They'd use it as cricket practice in the winter. And they had all these rotting nets that had been put up since then. And they basically, it wasn't open to the public. They'd use it just for a dumping ground for old tables and chairs and lights and what have you from pubs that they'd refurbished or whatever. So it's just full of junk, And I said, look, to be honest, this place is great. And I'm not asking you to spend any money or anything. If you just clear out the stuff, just you all the tables and chairs, just random ones, that's fine by me. Just leave them there. I'll put a stage in and I'll put a sound system in, and people can go and get drinks from the pub. So you're guaranteed to at least make something out of it, even if. And they said, well, all right, yeah. And and then as things progressed, they said, look, what we'd really like to do is do it up properly, actually. And make it a proper venue and so on and so forth. But in order for us to do that, you have to agree to take the place for at least 10 years. And sign a proper lease and everything like that. And I said, I'm very happy to do that, because any comedy promoter will tell you one of the biggest problems you have is, regardless of how successful it is, some twat comes along who wants to chuck you out for the most ridiculous reasons at some point. Whatever. It's just a rule of, management, I think. So basically, I was very happy to do that, and they spent £250,000 in 1990 whatever doing it up, which is fair bit of money. Put a fair amount of faith in me, really. Is that I'm just some bloke off the street.
Yeah.
So it worked out great, and it was lovely, sort of purpose-built club, and right from the word go, it was really popular. And Fuller's were obviously delighted as well. We filled the place every weekend, and rest is history, as it were. So.
Well, I'm so pleased for you. I am so pleased, because it is genuinely one of the best clubs that I've been to. That's why we keep coming back. I've got so many memories of seeing the comedians there. I've written a few of them down. Jeff Innocent is a particular favourite. He always headlines and just storms the audience with his
nonsense. Him and his audience just seem a perfect match, even and as he says, for the other side of the evolutionary scale.
He's just incredible. Recently we came to see Al Murray, who was just amazing. He's done the podcast here, and he's just, I think he's as good as Alan Partridge. I think he's just about the best character comedian in Britain.
Oh yeah, he's brilliant.
He's phenomenal.
I think he works particularly well in that sort of quite tight-knit club environment, because he's a sort of big act. He's a big guy, and the fact that everyone's all squashed in around him just makes it even better, I think.
Yeah. Very much
work really well in the club.
Yeah. One of my favorite nights that I ever had there was Ricky Grover was on the bill.
Yeah.
There was a particularly nasty individual in the front row, not being very pleasant, heckling them. And he stopped the show, he jumped down, he threw him out.
Yeah, yeah.
And then he came back on to the Rocky theme because he's an ex-boxer. And he was literally given a standing ovation. And I thought, that's incredible.
That's the thing. When you book Ricky, you get a great actor and a bouncer all thrown into one. It's
just amazing because
put up with it. And what I liked was as well, that guy had two mates with him, if you remember.
Yeah.
Came back in
after load of them.
And he said,
and I was like,
you coming out? And they just went. Out they went.
Yeah, because obviously we're not there to hear them. We're here to hear.
Well, precisely. And I mean, an ordinary heckle he could deal with, but I mean, they were like really.
Oh, that's horrible.
Been really insulting to the random member of the audience sat next to him, and he wasn't going to put up with it. So out they went. Right.
When I mentioned at the top of the interview about being a compere, you have actually compared for the night, haven't you?
I know. I do it quite a bit now. I quite like, but it's very much from the point of view of, I'm as far as I'm concerned, I'm still a member of the audience, if you see what I mean. I'm a member of the audience who's organised it for the rest of us. And as part of that, I'll host. But I think it personally works quite well if the person running the gig also hosts a show. In that, first of all, it keeps the pace up of the night, which I think is important. But also just all the little business stuff that needs to be done, where the bar is, this, that, and the other. I can do it more naturally than someone hired in, if you like. And I just found I was often having to say to the person, "Oh, can you tell them this? Can you tell them that? It's quite important. We need to do it for the running at night and stuff." I thought, well, I might as well do it myself, and I've gradually built up sort of little gags to cover all those kind of things.
Yeah, it's great. Do you get nervous before you go on stage?
I don't actually. I never do. I'm thinking back to the first time I did it, and I was probably slightly. In fact, I had a real baptism of fire actually, because I started doing it sometimes. Usually, when we started, it was the classic 3 acts and a compere setup. But sometimes, in order to get better acts down there, in those days, it doesn't happen so much now. But they did extended sets. Right. So instead of there being 4 acts on the bill in total, there was 2, but you paid them sort of double money, and that made it worthwhile for. People like Mark Hurst, for instance, used to do that. Joe Brand did it a couple of times, and people like that. And on this particular occasion, Mark Thomas wanted to do it, and I thought, well, if Mark Thomas is doing an extended set, I've only got one more act on. It seems silly to get a compare, so I'll just do it myself, and then he can do longer. And just my luck, first time I'd done it. My brother used to sit at the door, and like an idiot, he let you think those guys that Ricky threw out were bad. They were tramps. These people. They weren't just a bit drunk. They were full on alcoholics. 2 women and a bloke. They plunked themselves right at the front, and I thought, and you could see they were just completely plastered. They were like, should have been sat outside Safeways of a big issue. It was literally. And so I thought, oh dear, this is going to be a problem, but we'll see how it goes. So I went up on the stage, and I was literally just going to say, ladies and gentlemen, there's no compare tonight. We've just got 2 acts on. Later on, you'll be seeing, Mark Thomas, but first, here's your fantastic support act, whoever. Give them a round of applause. Literally just that. So I go on, and even halfway through, even that very, very short beginning, one of these women goes, "Oh, where's Mark Thomas?" Like, oh, for Christ's sake, she's just going to interrupt the whole time. So I thought, well, back with my promoter's hat on, I thought it's better actually to stop. We haven't really started yet. I'm going to stop. I'm going to chuck these people out, and then we'll start again. So I said to them, look, I said, this isn't the show for you. You're too drunk. You're not going to enjoy it anyway, and everyone else is going to get pissed off. I'll give you your money back, and go, and no, they refused, right? Especially the women. The bloke was just so out of it. I don't think he cared. He would just gone on whichever direction he pointed. But these women were very aggressive, drunk, refusing to go. So I got the guy who ran the pub to give me a hand in, escorting them out. And luckily, like I said, the bloke went pretty much for his own accord. But these women were just fighting and fighting. And I mean, we had to literally kind of manhandle them out of the door. And then there was these concrete steps that led out of the pub and so on. This is in the sort of function room. I've got them outside, and now they're banging on the door, and we're having to bang the whole door. And very reluctant to do this. The manager called the police, and the police arrived about 15 minutes later. And after all this banging on the door and the fight and everything, they eventually carted them off. Okay, so now this is 20 minutes in the show, and all the audience, it was absolutely packed. The whole audience had seen all this as well. So I've now got to go back on. And I did think of something reasonable to say to cut the tension at this point. So I went back on and said, right, anyone else want to heckle?
That's brilliant.
He got a reasonable laugh. We were up and running.
That is brilliant. Because
that was a real baptism of fire, my first.
I was going to ask you how you cope with difficult audiences, but also you've hit the nail on the head, because I think your appeal, certainly when you are on stage comparing, is you are a member of the audience, because you're genuinely delighted that the acts are there, and you're looking forward to seeing them as well, like the rest of the audience. So you're very good at warming them up, which equals an excellent compare. Would you agree with that?
Well, I've sort of picked up a few, if you like, sort of techniques, or I'm always delighted if I think of something that I can say that covers situations that are bound to come up. Like there's a few birthday things I do. I mean, that seems a way to start things off. I do a thing which works quite well, where I split the audience into three to sing happy birthday. You all sing happy birthday. You sing the first line, you sing, and then I accidentally forget that there's a fourth line. So some poor sod at the front has to do
the last line.
That works very well. And what that does is when the guy stands up, is he has so it goes sort of happy birthday to you, happy birthday to you, happy birthday dear Jimmy, and then this poor son goes happy birthday to you.
Yes,
just naturally people applaud at that point, and it brings the audience together, and anyone who was at the bar or whatever now is paying attention and ready. So there's that. There's various sort of, I mean, it gets a bit dull when obviously you ask people what they do for a living. You ask them, I've got a joke about
variations on it.
As you probably know, I've got a catch-all joke for wherever they're from that isn't Chiswick. I always say, Brentford or Ealing or Acton. It's about 300 grand that way, isn't it? And of course, people in Chiswick, they're very proud of how much their house is worth. They like that kind of thing. And it's good because it doesn't matter where it is. You see, you can always do that joke, and it's a sort of catch-all, but looks reasonably spontaneous. And the other one, which I've thought of recently, and I was very pleased again because it deals with all the sort of difficult jobs. I mean, you ask people what they do for a living, you get always boring like project manager or IT consultant. Just so little scope to make anything out. So what I say now is, I ask people if they watch The Chase, which I watch and I like, and it's hosted by Bradley Walsh. I don't know if you know that. He's a brilliant host of that, and he's very good. I don't know how close you watch it, but Bradley also talks to the contestants a bit like I'm talking to you now, asks them what they do for a living and stuff. And if they do something a bit boring, he very skillfully and seamlessly moves on to their hobbies. So what do you do to relax, Jim? That's
brilliant. Yeah.
But the beauty of it is, it doesn't matter what job they do, you can do that same joke. So I've got those kind of things, and it gets through all the stuff that they actually need to know, like how many acts are on, about giving them a round of applause, about all that kind of all the business, if you like. And I definitely feel that the audience get impatient with if you like proper compares sometimes, because they feel obliged. I'm being paid, I need to do sort of 10-15 minutes at the top, and they don't necessarily. and the audience are there thinking, yeah, all right, but get an act on, and they misunderstand the role of the compere, I think, often, or maybe they do understand it, maybe we misunderstand it. Often, if I hadn't done it and I'm doing it, it's, oh, someone else did it last week, and they kept sort of trying to tell jokes and stuff, you know, and so I've gradually become convinced that the audience they need a little bit of introduction, be told what's going on, but very little really, and
I think the compere is the glue for the whole night.
Yeah,
They
just knits
keep the
it
thing
together
going,
and
but it's
liaises.
literally not too much, like you say.
Absolutely, and covers, like, you know, we might want to start while there's still a few people at the bar, so it covers that little bit while people are taking their seats and cohese themselves together. But that's all you need, and I'm quite happy just to be able to do that reasonably competent.
Do you have? We've touched on it before, but do you have a set procedure if you have any difficult members of the audience, or do you just remove them, or how do you
really
work?
I mean, it's a problem that every promoter faces. I think comedy gets it more than other stuff,
Right.
and people feel that comedy is sort of maybe a little bit like going to see a band or something like that, and they chat. And I mean, in a way, heckling is not a problem, because heckling is direct and it's something that, you know, you can deal with, and it's quite easy, and sometimes adds something to the night. You know, makes it a bit more immediate and a bit more live. But the worst thing is when people just chat during a show, or they think they're whispering, and in fact everyone around them can hear them. And then we just have a sort of few stages that we go through. We'll tell them to please be quiet, then we'll tell them to shut the fuck up, then we'll tell them we're going to throw them out if they say another word, and then we do throw them out, basically, because you've got to keep the rest of the audience on your side, and that's another mistake that can't they're supposed to be comedians, can't they handle a bit of it's not the comics I'm worried about, it's the other members of the audience who are getting pissed off because they can't hear properly. Do you know what I mean? I'm getting really pissed off as well. And so we try, you know, everyone, like I said, is walking a tightrope in those kind of situations, but you know, we try and deal with it, but it's always from the point of view of the audience to make sure everyone, like or most of the people, have a good time. And if we have all in that, we'll deal with it.
We have an absolute wonderful night. One of the things that I love, you mentioned about the wonderful room. It's so well spaced out that you got the stage and the seats and everything around.
Yeah.
You've got spaces either side with the bar and where the comedians are.
Yeah.
One of the things I love, because with the blog and the podcast, I like to get a picture with the comedians. What I love is that I can do that at your club, because they know I'm there because I've got this loud laugh, which I should but they're just human beings. They're very willing for the support, and that's why the blog and the podcast exist, to support this wonderful industry.
Yeah, and they usually, I mean, obviously you get people who are doubling up and for the next gig sometimes and stuff. But generally they'll hang around, and we do have a dressing room out the back of the pub, but no one really seems to use that. They tend to like just hang around. There's a little curtain they can go behind gradually, but I think that's the nature of comedy, especially on a Friday and Saturday night. People they come and go, and they just hang around on the edge of the audience, and they're always very happy to chat to people after.
Well, it's I'm very honoured to be able to do that. One of the wonderful things as well, one of the great acts I saw, there's two that come to mind. One is Alan Davis, who really rarely plays comedy clubs generally, but he seems to be quite regular with you. And the last time I saw him, he was one of the few acts I actually stood up and gave a standing ovation, and he gave me a thumbs up. I've never actually met him.
Yeah, he's brilliant. I love Alan Davis, and I mean the first gig he did was back in like 1992 or something. And he was very kind of hot young stand-up in those days, and brilliant. And then he obviously got the part on Jonathan Creek, and he acting. And I think people have sort of almost forgotten that he's a stand. Don't think of him as a stand-up. They're sort of maybe quite surprised, but no, I think he's excellent. And I'm surprised. I mean, basically, what I do each kind of season that I have, I'll send him an email and I'll ask him if he fancies doing it, and if he does, he does. If he doesn't, fair enough. I don't think he needs to do it for the money. He certainly doesn't. So, but if he's got something coming up or something like that, and I think he comes there just because I ask him as much.
Right, it's so good. I've been watching his career for years, and I memorably saw him when he first started out at the Jabez Clegg pub, which is no longer in Manchester. And there was the room, and next door there was a bar.
Yeah.
And he did about an hour, and the audience were desperate for last orders. And literally he was chatting away, and he said, "Look, if you want to go next door and get a pint and come back, I'll just stand here and talk to the wall." Yeah. And everybody left, apart from about 2 or 3 people. He came back, did another half an hour. It was amazing. Oh, yeah. He is. So I'd love to meet him. So obviously, next time he's on.
Oh, okay.
I would love to say hello to him. He sent me a very nice testimonial. He said you reminded me of these gigs that from way back. So thank you very much.
He's been doing gigs since way back. I don't know when he started. Yeah. I'm guessing he would have probably started in like 88, 87.
Something like that, yeah, very much so, yeah. I think I saw him at the Comedy Store. The other one, who I've never met either, but I know on social media, is Omid Jalili. But I've seen him many times, especially at your birthday, the Comedy Club birthday gigs. He normally headlines them.
He's such a great guy, Omid. Yeah. He's fantastic. Yeah. He's doing a brilliant job in raising awareness about the problems in Iran at the moment.
Very much so, yeah.
And, I absolutely love him, and he's a brilliant act.
He's so really good. He's
just got absolute comic bones. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Very
a classic. Could read the telephone directory and it would make me laugh. And unfortunately, not playing so much anymore. He was living in West London. Right. He lives in Ipswich now, so
all right.
I think so. So it's harder for him to get to gigs, but he's still. I mean, funny enough, I actually spoke to him yesterday. Hopefully, fingers crossed, he'll be on in February.
Well, again, I've never met him. I'd love to meet him. We saw him in Edinburgh last year.
Is the 16th and 17th of Feb, I think, and or maybe 17th, 18th, something like that.
Brilliant. I'll keep an eye on that.
Few days, so fingers crossed.
That's brilliant. We are recording tonight in January 2023, and I can tell you we will see you on Saturday because we have tickets for Saturday. So we're coming along. I hope you're going to be there Saturday because it's one of really my favourite acts.
Club bill, isn't it? It's Booth Beach, Sheffield.
Raphael, I've loved for years. I just love the surrealness. He's so good. And he's been on here and he sort of like couldn't care less attitude. No. It's just
again, like funny enough, he's very good friends with Omid, funny enough. And
they tour together, don't they?
Like Omid, he's just lovely bloke, very easy to talk to.
Brilliant. We once saw Booth Big Raffo, I can't remember where, it was somewhere remote in London, and he did this hour. And he said, a friend of mine's going to come on and play the bongos. And it was only...
Really?
And then he was like, wow! And he came on and did it and then ran off. Yeah. Anyway, congratulations on your club. Long may it continue. And we will keep coming along as long as you'll have us because it's such a good vibe.
Or any of your listeners are very, very welcome anytime.
Thank you so much indeed. Right, let's move on. So... where are we now? I know what we're going to talk about. Not only do you run the Headliners comedy, how do you organise the Ealing Comedy Festival? Because that is a strand off that, isn't it?
Yeah, I mean, that's a sort of, obviously it's on a much bigger scale, but that started again from sort of fairly humble beginnings. When we were doing a club in Hanwell in the early 90s, in common with all comedy clubs, it was always a bit quieter in the summer. You know, loads of acts go off to Edinburgh. It just gets warm and light in the evening, etc.,
Yeah.
etc. And at the time, I lived in Ealing as well, so I went along to what was then just the Ealing Jazz Festival one time, which you know, it's in this sort of in those days, quite a small marquee in the park, you know, on a summer evening. You know, lovely event, and I just thought, God, this would be great for comedy. You know, why wouldn't you do comedy here? So I sort of approached them. Ealing Council ran it, and I approached Ealing Council and I said, like, you know, if you like, I can from next year I can do a night of comedy. Again, my usual approach: it won't cost you anything. You know, I'll pay for all the acts and publicity, etc. Sell tickets, and you know, you can only gain in beer sales, really. And they agreed, and we did one night in this place that held 200 people. And there's a lady from the council who bizarrely knew my granddad, and she was put in charge of selling tickets in the park. She had a little tent in the park, no online in those days, obviously. And I just remember going over there to see how many, and she was so excited. She said, "Oh, I've sold them all! I've sold them all! We've sold them all!" And so it sold out the first one. So then the following year, I think we did 2 nights, and then after 4 or 5 years of it, we expanded it up to the big 5 night thing that it is now, in a much bigger tent, and that effectively gave us a budget to book bigger acts. And it's been, you know, rock and rolling ever since, really.
So what was the first year of it?
It was 90, I think 93 or 94. I can't remember exactly.
And can you remember who was on the
had a 25th anniversary when I wasn't actually sure if it really was the 25th, but just assumed no one was going to check. Do you know what I mean? But it probably was the 25th. That was 2019, and so I think it started in 1994.
Can you remember who was on the first bill?
I can. Mark Thomas, funny enough. Again, his name comes up again. Mark Thomas was on. Simon, a guy called Simon Fox compared it. I don't know if you ever came across him.
Yeah.
And an American guy who's sadly died since, called Robert Schimmel, who was over at the time.
I've heard of him.
Excellent act, and quite well regarded in the States. And he was superb that night. And I think Woody Bop Muddy might have opened. Do you remember Woody Bop Muddy, the guy who smashed records?
Yeah.
Woody Bop Muddy's Record Graveyard. It was, like I said, much more sort of cabaret in those days, you know.
Very much so. Yeah.
So you know, a great bill, and everyone had a great time. It's out in the park. There's a beer tent, all that kind of thing. And so we just expanded it since, and now we do 5 nights, and the tent holds over 1,000 people, and you know, and that allows us to get really quite big names. I mean, you know, everyone's done it. Bill Bailey's done it. One actor can't get to do it. I think he probably did it in the early days when he was just another actor on the circuit, who I think would be so perfect for him, is Greg Davis.
Oh, it'd be superb.
Every year I go to Avalon and sort of try and get it sorted, and it never.
He would be brilliant. We went one year, and Barry Cryer was comparing.
Yes.
And Barry Cryer has been on here. My claim to fame with the podcast is that I was probably the last person to interview him about his career. Really? God bless him. Yeah. And he sort of like looked at me when I first started, thinking, "Who's this fly by night?" But at the end of it, he was loving it because I knew all about his career, and it was like, "What was it like working with Morecambe and Wise?"
He's brilliant.
He was just extraordinary and a great joke teller. We see him every year at Edinburgh. And he came on, God bless him, to the Ealing Comedy Festival, and he got the wrong way round. He
got a bit confused at one point, didn't he? That was.
Everybody loved him dearly.
It was the pints of bitter that he'd already had, I think.
So it's wonderful. It's so good.
No, and no one. The beauty of it was no one cared. You know, no one in the audience.
That's the thing.
It didn't
matter because it was him. yeah,
right order. And they loved Barry so much
yeah,
he get
yeah.
away with anything
I
really, and
went.
probably just went on and told one of those great old tags that he does and pulled it all back with no problem.
It's such a wonderful legacy, really. I was very kindly invited to the celebration of his life, and that was extraordinary in the theatre, really well. To date, what do you think's been your comedy highlight? Do you think creating headliners from the start, or the Ealing Festival from the
Yeah,
start?
I mean, in a way, they're all in retrospect, they all are, but all these things, of course, happen very gradually.
Yeah,
I think between Fuller's agreeing to go ahead with headliners and it actually opening and having the first night was probably a year passed in between, and there was lots of little bits in between. I mean, I remember because I got to know the guy who from Fuller's who designed it pretty well actually, and he says he still remembers the look on my face when I first saw it because it went from like a building site to being finished. And I just went, oh, it's just fantastic,
wow, that must have been
from knocking
amazing.
around in sort of compromising in rooms above pubs and stuff. We suddenly have this beautiful venue.
Yeah,
Where, yeah,
yeah,
it was amazing. And so that, I mean, that was a real highlight. Obviously, when that started, that felt great. But from the early days, I mean, that was, I think, one of the most exciting nights was, I think, the first time we sold out in, because I started the club in Hanwell in June,
right.
not realizing that was going to be a quiet period, and I was perfectly happy with the amount of people that were coming, and then suddenly, some point in October, and again, then in those days, no one booked online, so you didn't notice how many
Yeah,
people were
yeah,
coming. Just
yeah.
opened the door and they came till it was full, and then it said we can't let any more in. And the first time it was full, it was very exciting. And I remember going down to the little room, and it was all everyone paid in cash, and I had like I don't know 400 quid. I just couldn't believe it. Much. And that real thing of that this was just an empty room at one time,
Well
and
done,
done
yeah.
all this. I've filled it with people who are having a great time, and look, I've got 400 bloody quid, which is a lot more than I'd earned,
Yeah.
in 1 week any time before that. It's just so that was all very exciting when that happened, and when it was, and it really did rock at the time, and it was slightly different. Now comedy's another thing that people go and do, but they kind of know roughly what it's going to be
Yeah,
like.
yeah,
You know what
yeah.
I mean? They think, well, yeah, let's go there. We'll have a good time. Same as if you go and see a film at the cinema or whatever. But in those days, a lot of people they really didn't know what to expect from a comedy club, and there was lots more variety, and it was really exciting actually in those days.
Can you tell me the process, I suppose, following on from that, how you go about booking the comedians that appear at your venues?
Okay.
Are they on a rota? Do you look for new comedians?
Kind of,
How
yeah.
does
I
it
mean,
work?
it's a difficult one because you've always got a slight dilemma between uh you do have to freshen it up with new people, and I'm always on the lookout for new people,
Yeah,
but you do have to keep the standard really high.
yeah,
It feels to me like you sort of get punished for one bad act way out of
yeah.
proportion than you get credit for the good ones. Do you know what I mean? And I mean, I would say that we've built a pretty high bar for ourselves at that club because they don't actually realize how good some of these bills are. But
Yeah, 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 yeah. Very well. I mean, the one we're coming to on Saturday is
yeah,
extraordinary. Paul
exactly.
McCaffrey, Jeff Innocent,
Yeah.
Boothby
And
Graffer,
that, to be
amazing.
honest, the gigs that we've got on, that probably doesn't stand out, ironically, because we've got
No,
Kerry Godliman on later in the month,
she
and
she's
Sean Walsh.
probably my favorite female comedian.
Yeah,
I
I mean
love
she's
her.
brilliant, but
Yeah,
but so is Paul McCaff, and so
yeah,
is
yeah,
Innocent, so is
yeah.
Boothby, So, but that one's virtually sold out already.
Mm,
Whereas I mean this weekend will be busy as well.
yeah.
But yeah, so it's a very high bar, and it's in order for someone new to come through, they have to be pretty good, or at least promising and show something. One of the other good things about me emceeing when I MC, that enables me to have a 10-minute spot as well.
Yeah.
Um, So we do get, and I try and see as many people as I can that way.
Yeah.
But it's difficult, when because there's only 3 slots a week. We do September, October, November, and then we do another season January to May, and that's it. And the mathematics of it are such that really I haven't got that much room to put people on.
Yeah.
So some people, so I don't know. So the process, I do it in sort of seasons. So September to November is like one season, and then January to May is the next season. Occasionally, people will repeat within that who are particularly good, but generally, I'll put a different lot of people on it.
That's great. So I suppose following on from that as well, who are your favourite comedians? Did you have comedy growing up? Have you always liked comedy?
Oh, what when I was younger, I
Well,
always liked.
now.
I certainly liked the idea of stand-up comedy, and I liked jokes. I loved going back to that original show that we put on when I was at college. I loved doing that, and I felt sort of like quite excited by the whole thing.
Yeah.
And I loved going out looking for acts when I first started. But I suppose I like the same things that most people my age liked as a kid, Dick Emery and
Yeah.
Dave Allen,
Yeah. Oh, brilliant.
Monty Python, Jasper
Yeah.
Carrot, all those kind of things.
Yeah.
Billy Connolly. There wasn't that many well-known
No.
comics these days. I mean, the comedians was a bit kind of, even in those days, was a bit lame, to be honest.
I think the two best to come from that were Roy Walker and and I used to love Mike Reed doing all that.
Yeah, Mike Reed. I always find there's something, as a kid, something slightly intimidating about Michael. I don't know. It looked like
Frank Carson, though.
It looked like he'd throw you out of a pub window.
He would be wonderful on here. You wouldn't get a
I must admit, at one time at the comedy festival, we booked Mick Miller, and I liked the idea in those days of having old school comics, and Mick Miller, he was really good, but I think, that they really had an ability, the sort of timing and the rhythm of their sets was fantastic, but I don't know. All those kind of comics, I always feel they need a good editor. They need to get rid of.
We saw Mick Miller and Jimmy Cricket do half an hour each again at the Fringe, and sitting in there behind me taking notes was Tim Vine, and Les Dennis as well was there.
Oh, really?
Miller was brilliant. Miller was absolutely brilliant. Jimmy Cricket was good, but not in the same league. And I've asked Mick Miller to come on here. I hope I get him because I'd like a few.
He's still around. I mean, he must be getting on.
He is still going. Yeah. I think he plays Liverpool way somewhere around that.
He had a lovely joke, which I always remember, and I always tell people if I want a sort of quick joke about the guy who goes into a Spanish restaurant and he says to the waiter, "Oh, I'll have the squid," and the waiter says, "Well, you can have it, but it'll be 6 hours." And he said, 6 hours? How come it takes long? He goes, "Well, we boil them alive and they keep turning the gas off." It's some old-fashioned mainstream joke.
What about comedians now? There must be loads.
Yeah, I mean there are. I mean, there's Omid. I absolutely love. Jeff Innocent. I look forward to see him. For some reason, I mean, obviously, I see a lot of comedy and I see a lot of people multiple times for one reason or another. And for some reason, and this is nothing to do with necessarily how good they are. Some people are watchable over and over again, and even seeing them do the same stuff, and some less so. And Paul Tonkinson is another.
Oh, he's superb. He's been on here. He was wonderful.
Yeah, I could just sit and watch him. Every time he's on, I actually stand in the room and make sure I watch every minute of it and just enjoy it. Justin Morehouse, I think, is fantastic.
Yeah. I mean, there's another one who always plays your club. We always see him at headliners.
Yeah. If he's down in London, I try and get him out. He'll tend to do the Comedy Store and my place. And the nice thing is it's only sort of 20 minutes down the Piccadilly line from the Comedy Store. So, and they have an early show and a late show. So quite often people like
my first ever gig in 1974 was Les Dawson. with the family, and we're all
Well, it's awesome. Isn't it?
He was hilarious.
Yeah.
And then a year later, I saw Tommy Cooper, and that was just amazing. And
You saw him live.
saw him live, and the curtains opened. He was lying on a bed, and one woman in the audience started laughing, and it trickled round, everybody laughing, and he hadn't done a thing. He's just lying on the bed. And after about 5 minutes, he pops his head up and goes, What? Somebody come on. He's just priceless. And I got the bug. And so I don't know where the spreadsheet came from, but I made a note of everything I've ever seen. Got this enormous spreadsheet with all the acts and everything else.
Brilliant.
I remember where my laugh came from. We went another holiday to Torquay, and we went to see Tom O'Connor. And he was just pattering away and laughing away. But I burst out laughing at him, and it floored him. He had to leave the stage.
Oh, really?
And then come back on and start again. And I thought, I've got something here. But certainly when I came down to London, as I said, the Comedy Store, we used to go to a lot. Yeah. We used to go to Jongleurs a lot. But now, of course, it's always be comedy. It's the headliners. It's the Bedford Arms. It's the Comedy Store again. There's so much scope, and there's so
all of which have been going since those early 90s. Funnily enough, it's funny how, like the Banana Club, the Bearcat, Downstairs, all lasted all the way through. Really,
it's so good because, as I said, not only does this blog support all the big comedians, it's also the up and coming ones as well, which is great, and you can watch them all. Like me, do you go to a lot of comedy as a member of the audience? I don't know whether you
probably not as much as I should, to be honest. I mean, people, like yourself, did ask, where'd you get the acts? And I mean, the thing is, I know who all the acts are, really. And there isn't much apart from to see new people, but new people tend to come to your attention one way or another anyway. But occasionally I go out and if there's 2 or 3 people that I've heard the name a bit and haven't actually seen, I'll go out. And I should really go out more. I mean, inevitably it's a bit of a busman's holiday. You know what I mean? I already work 2 days a week, Richard. Blimey,
good on you.
But I have seem to have quite a busy life. There's always something happening. It's quite hard to get out and find time and space to do it. But I should find more, and I always enjoy it when I go. Even when you go and like 6 people in the audience on a Tuesday night place or something, I always have a good time.
I love finding new talent and originality out there because
absolutely. And I'm always amazed how many good people there are. And I mean, sadly, like I said, I haven't actually got enough slots to put on all the people who deserve it, really, and who my audience would love, but that's just, like I say, that's just the mathematics of it, really. But
well, keep doing it, my friend.
Young comic now. It wasn't when I started. You know, if anyone was any good, they tended to do. You could move to being a professional fairly quickly if you were good. Whereas now you can be good and still struggle to get gigs.
There are a lot of comedians who I think should be playing arenas and aren't. And there's a whole argument about the arena. I mean, I think it's far too big. You need a room your size to see a decent comedian. I remember. I mean, we had all the stuff about Peter Kay announcing another tour, and it's gone through the roof. I saw him 1995 in a club in Manchester on a bill of 5 acts. He was on, and I laughed so hard at him, I missed the 5th act.
Oh, really?
I had to go up and apologise to Dave Gorman.
Wow.
On the back. But it's like watching. I knew he was going to be so good because he's so naturally funny, and he deserves everything he gets, which is wonderful. He's back and stuff. But it's like, well, it's an arena. You need to see them in. There's nothing more me, especially in somewhere like Headliners. You've got the bar and you've got the set.
Absolutely, and it's all immediate.
And you go in and you have a few beers and you're ready for it. And you go, right, sit down, make me laugh. This is wonderful. I've got friends around me. I know the people on the stage, the comedians. And live comedy, you're in the moment. So, anything can happen. It's wonderful.
Yeah, absolutely. Whereas an arena show, by definition, has to be very kind of slick and planned. But I just can't understand why someone would sit at the back of that and what
you see a little tiny dot. Yeah. I have so much enjoyed talking to you. It's been an absolute joy. It really has. And I think you should write a book. Definitely right.
I don't get around to writing an email most days. So,
is there anything more you'd like to say? Do you want to?
Not at all. It was fun. It was great. Everything covered. Really
wonderful. Well. Long may Headliners and the Ealing Comedy Festival continue. Thank you so much for everything you do, and we will see you on Saturday.
Brilliant. See you there. I'll buy you a beer.
Thank you so much, and all the very best to you. You take care.
Cheers.